All right, Aftershocks, Trevor's, Matt, and Chris with you for another discussion episode today. And our guest is someone very familiar to our listeners. If you're a longtime listener here on the CMS Network, you know him as the host of the legendary Shockwaves Skullsessions podcast. And of course, he's the director of the Inside Metal series, as well as the Bay Area Godfathers documentaries, part 1 and 2. Of course, I'm talking about the Armenian maven of metal. Man, I miss saying that. I really do. It just flows off the tongue so nicely. The Bob father, Mr. Bob Nalbandian, is joining us. What's up, Bob? How's it going?
All right. I miss hearing it, man. No, it's good to see you guys again, man. It's like old times, like an old high school reunion.
Wow, now you're really going back a long time there, Bob. High school.
Yeah.
We're not that old, are we? I guess we are. Yeah, I guess we are. You guys are.
The
You guys are, not me.
Going strong as well, man.
Yeah.
I was just checking out just before earlier today. I was checking out the Randy Burns interview. Really good stuff, man.
Yeah, Randy was great. He was a lot of fun to come on and just kind of shoot the shit about the old days. That's for sure.
Which is great because I hadn't heard about his name. I mean, he was like the happening guy, and in the late '80s, after he did the Peace Sells album and all those combat records, and then it seemed like he just kind of disappeared. So it was good to hear from him.
Yeah. Yep. And he's back in business right now doing mixing. He's looking for bands. So anyone out there that's listening, Randy Burns, hit him up. He's looking for bands. So not a bad guy to start your career with if you're a young band too, and you need someone to mix your record. That's the guy to do it. No doubt. So Bob, anyway, man, what's going on? So I mean, I know last time, it's been a while, obviously, since we've done a podcast together, but I know you've been still, busy with some stuff. I know recently, you were down in LA doing some being a part of that Metallica documentary. That's supposed to come out, right?
Ago. Yeah, that's that was we shot that with Adam Dubin a couple months back, I believe, and so I don't know what they're just archiving a bunch of stuff. So I don't know what's going to come out. I don't know if I'm going to be on the cutting room floor or if it's going to be like a series. I know they've just been interviewing all people from the old days, and but it was great, man. Adam was great. We talked about the really the beginnings of Metallica when I knew them, when I knew Lars before he actually formed the band, and so we dug pretty deep. So it's going to be good. He's got a lot of people involved in this. So and he doesn't even know where it's going yet. Yeah, now I think it's it's kind of secretive now. It's not really, but it's just kind of like the band said, hey, just archive a ton of interviews, and I think they just want something to a story about their whole career that encompasses from the beginning till the end. So that's kind of what they're going for. So
right on.
Yeah.
Bob, I'm curious, since you are our Metallica expert here more than anybody else. I'm sure you've seen this whole thing with Hetfield and the crying on stage and all this emotional stuff. And I don't want to bag on him. I really don't. I'm just more interested, as somebody that knows these guys a little better than us that are just kind of peripheral. Is it time for him to stop? Do you think that the reason Hetfield's emotional is because he wants to stop and he just can't because he'll have to fire 100 people, that work in the Metallica organization?
I think he loves it. Hetfield's always been a very emotional guy.
Okay.
From the beginning, and he went through a lot, man, in his younger years. So, I think he's kind of looking back and. Being a father now, am I questioning? Am I too old? Probably seeing other people up on stage and Metallica to me, say what you want about, what they say during the shows or whatever, but live, they still fucking bring it, man. And he still brings it. His voice is still there. His playing is still there. The energy is still there. So they're going to carry on for a while. I think I know he loves playing. I actually hooked up my friend, Gary from Jaguar. I don't know if you saw that little video footage.
Gary Peppard, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Gary from Jaguar. He lives in Brazil. So I hooked up for him to meet with Lars and James, and they met backstage. And check it out. It's on my Facebook page, Gary Jams, the Dutch connection, because, Jaguar was one of James and Lars, favorite new wave of British heavy metal bands growing up. And so he was really cool. And just seeing that footage there just shows how cool James is, and that he's just a regular still a metal fan. He's singing along with the lyrics, and but Yeah, I mean, I think it was, kind of an emotional thing. I know those were huge shows out there in Brazil and throughout, all over South America. So, I'm sure he just had an emotional moment on stage. I think it was very legit. It
Sure. So, do you think it was just that he was having a bad day and not the accumulation of 6 months of being bummed or pissed off or whatever?
Probably
think it was
both, probably both. It probably just kind of hit him all at once on stage, and he kind of was just reflecting on stuff, and seeing a lot of bands, getting really old and starting to retire and calling their last tours. I'm sure it's kind of on all their minds, and I'm sure they would like to get into doing other things. And dude, a lot of times you always feel, man, I mean, we do this too, whether it be whatever kind of work you're doing. Man, I'm getting too old for this shit.
Yeah.
I gotta kind of, and I think he's kind of seeing the same thing, especially, I mean, obviously they don't have the rigorous tours that they used to have, but traveling and doing what they do. I knew they flying back already, like to the Bay Area, do that one festival, the wine festival.
Oh yeah, the bottle rock or something.
Bottle rock, yeah. So they're traveling all over and going. So I think he kind of wants to be with family, but he'll carry on. They'll carry on.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. And again, I'm gonna be clear on this. As much as I hate family Metallica that we have now with the okay friends and here's the 9-year-old, and I hate that. I want the old metal up your ass guy. I mean, musically, they're still fine. I mean, if you compare them to everybody else that came up in 1981 that's still a band, they're still the best. They're by far the best of that. They're better than 90% of the modern today bands or the bands of the last 20 years. So I'm not trying to say they're horrible by any stance. I just was like, wow, for him to put that kind of emotion on the stage to show that. I mean, he's always been the warrior of that band, or at least the perceived warrior of that band. And for him to be the one to be like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. It was like, wow, that's a big deal.
Well, things change, and I think they've always been very real about how they feel on stage. And look, if people grow up and you become a family man, and it wouldn't be legit if he was just yeah, fuck it, middle up your ass and all that stuff from a
sure, it wouldn't be real,
like Slayer talking about some of the shit they used to. I mean, all the bands kind of have to grow. I mean, there was a thing, something I forgot who wrote about it. Like talking about like White Snake or all these other, Winger or whatever, singing these lyrics about, young chicks, when you're in your 60s. That's kind of creepy,
Yeah.
Those guys, so it's kind of that thing too with the lyrics and with the stage rap. You can't do the same. When you were 17, 18, that was legitimate. It wouldn't be, if he was doing that today, it wouldn't be legit. It would be phony. Oh, they're just
phony.
So, I think it comes from the heart, what they do. I mean, he's a family man, and they have a whole different life than when he was struggling when he was 18. They're multimillionaires now, and they can't act as if because that's the one thing that's so phony. I always used to hate when Howard Stern would get on talking about people. Oh man, it must be so great having so much money. It's like, dude, you have 10 times more money than the person you're interviewing. Shut up. We're trying to act like you're still from the underground. You're a sellout. Just come on. So
just started with that guy. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I mean, so when I see that, when people are trying to be like they used to be, and they don't, compensate for them being older and them being wealthier and them being, more famous and whatever, you have to kind of, go with it.
So
right.
Well, speaking of Hetfield and family, have you heard his son Castor's band Bastardane? Have you checked that out at all?
I haven't heard it yet. I know you told me about them, and I was familiar with them. They did the 40th anniversary. There was a bunch of shows around town. We actually didn't hit any of them, but I know Lars' son was playing as well, and same with Robert
Trujillo's. Well, yeah, right now I know. Hetfield's son Castor is in the band Bastardane. Trujillo's son has got a band called OTTO. I guess they're both touring right now. It was interesting because I think it was the last week. Eric Kluber from Void Vader, a friend of ours here on the show, and he messaged me. He's like, "Hey, you got to go to the show up there with both those bands." And it's funny because it just got me thinking. Because I did see an ad for it, and I didn't really even think of going. I mean, I guess if it was back in the day and it was, something I could just go up the street, pay $15 for, and whatever. Yeah, I'd probably go check it out or something. But it got me thinking too about how a lot of these, and we're seeing it, I think, more now than ever, and it's understandably, but you're seeing a lot of the, I guess you'd call it attrition that's happening in music. Obviously we see that, in Hollywood, right? You see a lot of actors whose kids become, they just get injected into the Hollywood stuff right away. I mean, they don't have to, work at it and so forth. So, I mean, I told Kluber, I was like, the way I look at that, and this isn't a knock, obviously, on them at all, because they're just kids, obviously, but, I listen to the music and, it's not bad, I mean, if you listen to Bastardane, it's pretty, it's sort of like it's got like a metal, grungy, alternative type of sound to it. It sounds like something out of the 90s. What's kind of interesting about it is the drums are just, because he's a drummer, right? His son. It's just way over the top. It's like definitely like a Saint Anger type of thing where it's just, I mean, I'm not even joking. It's way out in front. You can barely even hear the vocals. It's just like, whoa, this is too high in the mix. But like I was telling Eric, I was like, I'm not a big fan of that music. I'm not a big fan of, just because it's somebody's kid, a legendary musician or a band, somehow, or a highly regarded musician, has a son or a daughter, I mean, I know Steve Harris did it with his daughter and so forth, taking them on tour. But my thing is like, you can, I mean, obviously like Robert Trujillo's son, right? I mean, he filled in for Korn, right? He did some shows, I remember, for Korn. Yeah, that's really cool. But he's playing someone else's songs. And his band, OTTO, I think they're a little bit better. They're definitely more advanced. They're more of a progressive sort of metal feel to it. But I'm listening to the songs, the young kids, and the songs just aren't there yet. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
I'm not a huge fan. I mean, I just wanted to kind of bring this up since we're talking about it. I'm not really the hugest fan of, these kids of these musicians getting just a pass where they don't have to go out and work at it like a lot of, Right, go ahead.
Well, as I say, I mean, the fact that they're playing the clubs, and I never heard about these shows, they're not getting a pass as far as, I mean, the high-profile guy that everyone talks about is obviously Wolfie Van Halen.
Sure,
but I think in his case, and the funny thing about Wolfie, and I love Wolf. I think he's great. I think he's very talented. He's got a great band. I mean, good band. But I saw them open at a fucking stadium, opening for Guns N' Roses, and the guy's not stadium ready. Now that's a guy that got a pass. And what I don't like about, and that's fine if you admit it and all that, but he tries to downplay it. Oh, I don't use my father's name. Dude, everyone knows you're Eddie Van Halen's son.
Yeah.
And the problem with someone like that is he didn't work his way like his dad and all those bands from the 70s did. Van Halen played the club for years. They were a house band at Gazzari's and at the Whiskey. They busted their ass. They got their show together. When I saw that show, it looked like a garage band. I mean, they were all good musicians. It was a three-piece. He looked like shit, like real grungy. I mean, like he didn't shower. He was kind of fat, like no. And he's playing this stadium, and you got no rapport at all with the audience, huh? Yeah, we're the first rock band to play here at this stadium. Here's our next song. It's like, dude, it was just like, you're not ready for this shit. But seeing that these guys are out playing the clubs and not, I didn't think it was high profile. I didn't even hear about it. So it couldn't have been that high profile.
Well, what I mean is like, and I think it's smart, obviously, that they toured together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's different. I think, I mean, I guess I'm just saying is that there are a lot of people I think that are going to go. I guarantee you the thing will probably sell out just because of the names.
Sure.
They want to go see it. I'm just saying, and like I said, everyone's going to make their own choice. I'm not saying telling people what to do. I'm just not a big fan of doing that until you can prove that you can write good songs. I mean, it could be, no, I mean, well, because my thing is this, it's like, well, for one, too, he's a drummer. His son's a bassist. No one's going to go and see a rhythm section, play. I'm sorry. I mean, yeah, if his son Castor, if he was a guitarist, okay, maybe I'd go check it out. If he was a singer, maybe, you know what I mean? It's a little different. playing bass, or no one goes to watch a bass or a drummer. They just don't, unless it's
Well, they have a singer in the
someone.
band, right?
Huh? Well, they do. Yeah. But I'm just saying he doesn't sing.
Yeah.
And my thing is, it's just, I also think too, when you just brought up, like I said, I was going to mention Wolfie. Another great example is, I mean, you look at Hetfield. I mean, talking about, Hetfield and like you said, where he came from and so forth. I mean, nobody worked harder than Metallica. Nobody to get to where they are. And they got there because of what they were for. I just think, like, I mean, obviously these kids are gonna look. If I had a kid and I was that big too, of course you're gonna try to help your kid out and get him out there in front of people and have them become successful. I'm not blaming any of the musicians for doing that for their kids, but just as a fan, as a music listener, I'm not going to go and pay, go to even the club they're playing at's a good club. It's not like it's a little piece of shit. But I'm not going to go there, pay all this money just to see, to me at this point, not in the future, but it's sort of, to me, it's just like a novelty type of thing. It's just like, okay, it's if you listen to the songs, like I said, they're growing. I'm not knocking them. They're just kids. But there's, the songs aren't there. I don't see, anything special that's standing out where I'm like, wow, that sounds pretty a lot like what his dad could probably do. Let me go check that out. Music, I just think it's different. Like, it's different in sports, right? Sports, if you've got, one of your, sons or daughters as an athlete, they can not only a lot of them play as good as you, they can actually surpass you a lot of times, but you don't necessarily see that many times in music. 1 out of 10 times, musicians, it's a whole different thing because it's more internal. It's not physical. It's not like sports is. And so that's just my take. I just wanted to kind of, bring that up. And I guess, we'll get Mr. Aiken over there, his take.
I kind of, I've never to this day supported a single kids band. Honestly, I'll just be honest. Every single time I get one of those, and hey, it's Blaze Snyder, or it's Scott Weiland's kid, or it's Slipknot kid, or that's an instant turn it off for me. Because if I discover them because of what somebody else did, then to me they don't have any value. That's just me personally. That being said, I think I actually lean the other way, though, with the struggle that these kids have in today's world. In the social media world, these guys are doomed from the start. Hetfield's kid is a perfect example. He was getting shit talked before people heard a note from him because he didn't sound like Metallica, because he wasn't making Metallica type music. And the same with I remember reading on like Blabbermouth, I forget what Corey Taylor's kid's name is, but Corey Taylor's kid just got destroyed because they played at like 4:00 or something at a Knotfest show, and people were like hammering them because, well, this isn't Slipknot, this is shit. And it's like, man, these guys come in. I mean, you guys know, you've been around bands forever. The first time a band plays is not usually with a bunch of people wanting to hate you. And usually it's anonymous. And if you play really well, then 2 or 3 people are like, hey, who was that band? Do they got something at the merch table I can buy?
That's a good point.
These kids are getting murdered because of their parents. They get the good. They obviously get the, Hetfield's kid, Trujillo's kid, whatever. Your dads are in the biggest band in the world. Of course you're going to get attention that you wouldn't get otherwise. But goddamn, if you don't sound exactly like the biggest band in the world, you're going to be forgotten. That's why Lauren Harris, I think, went away so fast. Yeah. She had all the right breaks. She had to, obviously she went on. I saw that tour, the tour with her and Iron Maiden. And she had the right breaks, but the music didn't meet it. And instantly people were like, well, that doesn't sound like Iron Maiden. I'm done with this. And she was immediately dismissed, regardless of the fact that she actually was a fairly talented singer.
Well, that is the problem. And I think, it does go both ways. It is, you get that boost of being the person's kid, but you're also going to get a ton of hate. And that's just the way the business is nowadays with social media and everything. Everyone's going to have their preconceived notion about you even before you go out. If it doesn't sound like this, if it doesn't, I think it's a problem when, Steve Harris invites the daughter on the tour. That they should be doing. I don't know what the plans are for Trujillo and Hetfield's son and Ulrich's son, but they should be hitting the clubs. They should be doing a club tour like their parents did, just in a van and just go the old school way And, you know, if they get shit, they get shit, but they just got to go out and take it without any
Yeah.
favors and earn it for themselves. Now, I think
Mhm.
Wolfie got a big pass because, I mean, let's be honest. You know, it's because his dad died, so everyone felt sorry. And then Wolfie wrote that song about his dad, so there was already this huge publicity boost for Wolfie when he came out. And you know, he, even though he sounds nothing like Van Halen, he totally dismissed anything, and he was ripping on people and ripping on, you know, Roth and whatever, which, you know, Roth deserves to be ripped on to an extent. Kind of like, you
Well,
know,
he at least played on a record, though. You know what I mean? He played on a Van Halen record.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, he did do the record. Yeah, and
And he toured with them, so
that,
you know.
that is true. But even though he went, you know, right to the, you know,
Yeah.
to the stadiums, you know, and whatnot. But what I'm saying is he should have done something like, he did a whiskey show. If I was him, I would have hit up the whiskey and said, look, let me be the house band for like 2 or 3 months, because seeing them live, they sound good. I mean, he's very, very talented guy. Don't get me wrong, but the songs aren't quite there. The stage presence is not there at all. Awful stage presence. There's like no, and that's the thing with bands nowadays. I know you were going to talk about the newer bands, and there's just nothing on stage. There's no, if you're going to play an arena or a stadium like they did when I saw them, you better have some presence. You better have at least something. You don't have to be a David Lee Roth, but you could be a band like, you know, Scorpions or Priest or AC/DC that had no show, but just had that energy. I mean, or, you know, Iron Maiden, you know, Bruce, you know, commands the audience. So does James Hetfield. You know, you got to have that. And he's just like the shy kid up there, you know, shy, fat kid, just, you know, and it just doesn't, it's not good for stadiums. Play the clubs, work it, dude. Go work your show together. And that's what I think these bands should do. So hopefully but the bands are going to get shit regardless, you know, of being the son or daughter of somebody famous. And but my advice is let the parents don't bring them out on tour. Don't let them do it on their own. Let them figure it out for themselves. You know, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah. And there's some people, you know, I mean, there's some people who've done it, I think, correctly, or, you know, it's just saying like correctly, but they did it pretty, you know, well. I mean, not with, you know, obviously, like I'm just thinking of like, say, Max Cavalera. Obviously, he's not the same, you know, obviously, or echelon is, you know, Van Halen or Metallica. But I remember, you know, I remember when he started taking his son's bands out. It was like Lodi Kong and Insight. And I was like, you know, at first I was like, this is kind of ridiculous. You know, you want to take a decent, you know, I would think opener, you know, that people are going to kind of be, you know, but I will give them credit because they've done this now for a long time. You know, their whole thing was like, we're just keeping it in our little tribe here, our family thing. And they've done it for years. And I give the kids credit, like the band Insight, I think is, you know, their last album is pretty damn good. You know, and I mean, and it took time. I mean, they weren't so great at the beginning, but they've really become a pretty darn good band. And because I think because they worked it, you know, I mean, they worked the clubs with his dad, but on and on and on kept doing it. And they also started then touring on their own. So I think, you know, like I said, that's the thing about, like you're saying, I think when you go out and you play the clubs, you kind of work it. You're not coming from a place of entitlement. You know what I mean? It builds character. Yeah, I mean, the reason why Metallica and those bands, you know, Van Halen became huge just because they had that hunger to do it. No one was giving it to them. You know, when you're just giving it to them and here you go on a silver platter, you know, they got nothing to lose. It's no big deal. It's like, well, I'm still, if it doesn't succeed, I still got a damn good life. You know what I mean? I'm still wealthy. I still got my, you know, my dad here helped me out. So I don't think I could do another band and I'll continue to be helped out. So I think when you do it like the way I say, like, you know, the Cavaleras did, I thought they did it pretty well because now there's bands, you're starting to see a band like Insight, the Son's band, doing pretty darn good and putting out some good music. And they started too, about like 20 years old. I think he had one of his sons he plays drums in Soulfly. So he's been in the band for a while. If something ever happens to Soulfly, he's already a seasoned musician. He can go out there. He knows how it is to work it. But I think it's something. I mean, and you know, we've seen obviously history do it. I mean, one of the guys I always thought was an interesting situation in that same kind of vein was Jason Bonham. You know, another situation with obviously a megastar dad. You know, I used to laugh because I remember watching those videos in the 80s, and it was like they were, you know, and had a couple of, you know, decent songs Bonham, but you know, it was. I remember watching those videos, and they just try to make him the centerpiece. You know, like he was. The centerpiece of the band, like, you know, in the middle, it's like They put him up front with the drums. Everyone's in behind him, including the vocalists. I just thought that was so silly the way they did that. But let's be honest, someone like Bonham, he's a good drummer, Jason Bonham. But I mean, if you didn't have that name behind him, you think he'd be still around playing for bands? I would say no. I would say no. He's just an average, decent drummer. You know?
And here's the ultimate sell or lack of sale, as the case may be. I don't believe there's ever been not one kids band that has superseded the dad's band.
Yeah, exactly. Good point.
I don't think there's been a single one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Bob Dylan's son, I mean, they obviously didn't supersede
Wallflowers.
Wallflowers were pretty big for a while. I do.
Yeah, they were big for a minute. One
hit
had
wonder
like
type
two
band.
records.
Two hits. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know, man. I think that's the big problem is I don't think that you can. I don't. First of all, I think every one of these bands, and I've interviewed them all as they're coming through, because Lord knows those guys all work the publicists that I know. So I've interviewed every Blaze, Snyder, and the like that has come through. And most of them want to distance themselves from their dads. They don't want to be associated with their dad because they realize that it's a formula for death for them. And really, most of the time when they do acknowledge their dads as part of their rise or whatever, it's usually almost like a give up moment. Like James Labree's kid is out there now in a band called Falsette. He's a drummer, and they're out there touring. That they played dates with Dream Theater. So what does that, in my head, what does that say? In your head, what does that say? It says can't get their own gigs. You know,
well, if you're being a father, you want to help out your son and be the right, I get that too, but no, they got to start on their own. They got to work it on their own. And, it's not only about having somebody famous, but there's a lot of people that, have money, that could do, and that have the social media marketing where they could get viral on YouTube or on, Spotify, whatever, where they don't have to go out and work it. And their first shows are playing, opening up for big people, or just because they get 1 million views, they might get signed by a major management company or a record company or get this 360 deal. And it's the same thing with them. They don't work it either. They don't have the experience to be performing on stage. That's the problem with a lot of these bands, because nowadays it's all about marketing and doing everything on social media. And once you see these, and you can hear them in the studio, it's like, wow, this is a pretty good song. And then you see them live and you're like, this is shit. They got absolutely, and not that they're playing bad, but there's no, when I see a show, you want to see a show. You want to see, a stage show or something, where there's energy on stage, or, they're not just going through the motions. And that's kind of what you're seeing these days. So,
Well, I think that the thing too is when these bands take out their kids' bands, and we've talked about this a bunch of times, and I understand it, because of the just the way that also the music business is, but when they take their sons' bands or their daughters' bands or whatever out on the road with them, they're also filling up a spot there that can be used to really promote a really, really good up and coming band that's not getting attention. They're not helping, I should say. Right. I mean, like I said, I understand the financial and economic climate, of the music industry, like I said, but how else can music be replenished? We keep talking about how these guys are becoming dinosaurs and eventually going to retire, and then who's going to take their place? Well, if it's going to be their kids' bands taking their place, that's bad. That is not good. I mean, there's a ton of new bands in almost every subgenre of metal. Okay, there's plenty of supply of good bands out there. I mean, like I said, me and Chris, we interview them all the time. They need help. They need to go. I mean, they need to be able to. These bands need to be taken out, a band or two. I mean, like we always talk about. One of the talk about. I know, Bob, we've talked about this too. I mean, here in the Bay Area, I mean, you always see the classic thrash bands playing together, and if they do maybe take a younger band out, it's a band like Hatred. You know what I mean? Someone related to one of the big bands here. And like I said, I think it's great. Yeah, I mean, like I said, if I was in a position, I would do the same thing. Of course, I'm going to help my kids' band out, but I think I would also be like, okay, I wouldn't want them to take up this one spot. Maybe give them half that spot and bring out someone else. It's just, I mean, there has to be, I think, some sort of, balance to be able to replenish what's going to be missing, in another 5 or 10 years when these bands are gone. And if they're taking their kids' bands out, who, like I said, they don't have the hunger the same way their parents did, because, in a lot of ways. I'm not saying none of them do, but like the bands we've talked about, Metallica and Wolfie and so forth, they're not gonna have that hunger. You know what I mean? They're just gonna go live by their name and just ride the coattails of that. And then that's it. And then that, like for instance, with, like I said, the Bay Area Thrash, I mean, the fact that these bands continue to tour with each other like all the time, it's definitely great, because it's definitely continuing to, it's the same bands touring with each other, but at least people are going to see them. It's keeping that music alive. But what's the next generation of it that you're going to help, promote and go ahead. Yeah.
And not only that, but those bands like a Hatred. I'll use Hatred as a perfect example.
Mhm.
I love them personally. I think
they're really good.
I think they're a great
They're a good
band.
band.
That being said, the fact that every time I see them announced, it's as an opener for Death Angel or Exodus or whatever. When those bands retire, what are those guys going to do? They will not have built any of their own relationships to go out and tour on. They won't be able to call up, I don't know, John Keevil from Warbringer or whatever. And I don't know if they know each other or not. I'm just using that as an example. But they won't be able to call up Warbringer or Havoc or those bands because they haven't built that camaraderie coming up together that Exodus built with Death Angel and with Violence and with those bands.
You see some of those bands, the Warbringer, Fueled by Fire, all those bands. I don't know about touring together, but they're out there doing shows and like little festivals, and there are a bunch of those. And they're kind of older now, Ex Mortis and all those bands.
Yeah.
I don't want to say newer thrash bands, but they've been around since the millennium, and they've been building a pretty big following on their own. I mean, obviously they're not doing anything super original, but they're following the footsteps of the thrash bands. And they're actually getting out there. I think Hatred could do the same thing if they put like a little mini festival or mini tour with bands of their genre, those so-called younger thrash bands.
Right.
They could probably do all right, because they are starting to get a pretty big following. We saw some.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, but my thing is this. So I'll just use Hatred, right? Remember, Bob, we saw Hatred, right? We saw them.
Yeah.
But what were they when we saw them? What were they doing? Opening once again, and not for they were for Power Trip. So that's my thing. Is like, okay, normally in the past, these a band like Exodus or whatever would take out these younger bands, right? These bands eventually would be big enough, and they'd go and start headlining, and it would be that cycle. Then they would take over. I mean, that just sort of was the cycle of how it worked for so many years. But Hatred's, I mean, as good as they are, they're not a headlining band. So here they are opening for Exodus, but then they're still opening for all these other bands like Power Trip and so forth, where if you're getting those bills, you're being put on a big tour with an Exodus and a Death Angel and so forth. I expect that's going to be a band that's going to eventually be a headlining band. You know what I mean? But they're not. They're still opening for all these other bands. And once again, you're not, if Power Trip is still around, I mean, that would be the band I would say, if you are, one of these older thrash, bands, and you decide to do a tour, you take a Power Trip with you, because that was definitely that next band that was and they are still going to be around, which I heard, which is great, because I love them. And I definitely thought that they were the next band to take that music to then, just to this day and age. But if a band, like I said, a Hatred isn't really becoming one of those they're not a headlining band. I mean, as good as they are, they're just not a headlining band.
And the telltale with Hatred is, okay, they can play out there in the Bay as an opener for somebody. Which one of the big festivals have they been on? I believe none of them. Not Incarnation, not Rock on the Range, not
who knows them
any of
here.
the Rockville, whatever that thing's called. Welcome to Rockville.
The bad thing is that's the way to break now, is to be on these festivals.
Right.
To play in front of big audiences, you have to get on one of these festivals. And who does all these festivals? The same guy.
The Danny Wimmer guy.
Yeah. And it's just this monopoly of and to get in that circle, you have to play the game or whatever it is to do it, because it's basically the same guy that does all that stuff. So that's another thing. I mean, you don't have the clubs like you did back in the 80s or 90s. All the clubs, I know here in California, whether it be the Bay Area, San Diego, Los Angeles, all the clubs are closing down. Most of the big, notorious clubs. There's not a lot of places to play. And so, and the other thing is, people don't go see bands like they used to. They're on social media and looking at YouTube, and they're not actually actively going out surging out new bands. When we used, when I was younger, I'd any chance, a free night, you go to the Roxy, the Whiskey, the Troubadour, or the Woodstock or Radio City. You didn't care. You would usually catch a good band, or you would just kind of feel it out, go out there, see what's playing, but you would always go out regardless. It wasn't, it didn't have to be, a pre-planned thing. I'm going to go out. I'm going to go check out some
metal.
Dude, that was what people did back then.
When I lived out there, when I lived out in you guys' neighborhood, that was my Friday or Saturday. Either Friday or Saturday, I was going. I didn't even know who the bands were because they, the magazines that would have said, well, so-and-so's playing the Omni or so-and-so's playing Ruthie's or so-and-so's playing the Stone. They didn't come far enough down to where I was. So almost every single weekend, me and my friend Scott, we would just be like, okay, we're going to the Stone this weekend. And sometimes we would catch something cool. And sometimes we would get the Electric Cowboys or some bullshit. But you know what? It didn't matter because the shows were like $3 or $4, and it was like you went out. You just went to it, and I discovered so many bands that I'm still fans of today. Like first time I saw Love Hate was at a total unknown show at the Omni. I didn't know they were playing. I didn't even know who they were, but I saw them, and it was cool. Or Pantera. First time I saw Pantera before Cowboys from Hell was at the Omni. I mean, that was what we did back then. Now it's people would rather watch a YouTube video and make their decision on a band based on 30 seconds from a YouTube short or something. It's crazy.
There was always a scene, no matter who played. I mean, when I lived in LA, in Hollywood in the early 90s, every night, Tuesday was they had KNAC nights, Tuesday you had Cat House, Sunday Exposure 54, Thursday, KNAC Thunderdome. I was out all of those nights, and regardless of who was playing, sometimes you'd have big name bands like at Thunderdome. You'd have a Motorhead or Armored Saint or Badlands or Alice in Chains with Mookie Blaylock opening, which became Pearl Jam. You didn't, but it was always a scene. No matter who was playing, you always met people. And I would just go down there alone, and whether the band was good or if it was glammy or not, there was always a scene of a bunch of people, a ton of chicks, a bunch of musicians, people you knew, and it was just a fun gathering. Nowadays, even you go to the Whiskey or whatever, it's granted, the kids aren't out anymore. It's all when you see these kind of bands, it's all 50 and 60-year-old guys. It's the younger generation just doesn't go. I mean, I guess they're going out to other kind of raves or whatever or hip hop shows, but even when you see some of the younger metal bands, it's you went to go see Plush. Was it a young audience for them?
They were opening for Seven Dust, so it was a bunch of older guys, and the first time. Well, but I will say the first time that I saw Plush, I saw him with Wolfie, and that crowd was definitely younger. That was definitely, I would say it's still probably about 50-50 because I would say half the people were wearing their fucking Van Halen shirts. They weren't there really to see, they certainly weren't there to see Plush, and they really weren't there to see Wolfgang. They were there to
see Eddie Van Halen's son.
Yeah. They were hoping that he would play Panama or something.
Exactly.
But the one band I got blown away with, I remember Jonas invited me out. He had directed this video, and I had barely heard of the band at the time. And it was their first time, I think their very first LA show, and it was the Struts.
Oh yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And they're not a metal band, but they're a very 70s band. But they played the Troubadour, and he goes, "Yeah, I just directed their video. They got a huge deal. They got all this and this and that." I'm thinking, all right, there's going to be a few people, and I hadn't been to the Troubadour in years, and this was a good 3 years ago or so when they like I said, first time in LA. I heard about them from England or wherever they played. Place is packed, and it's all young kids going crazy. And I'm like, I'm thinking, did they hire these people to come, or are they like legit fans? But they knew the words, and the singer looked like a young Freddie Mercury, and they reminded me of old school Sweet and Slade. We hung out with the band afterwards, talked to them, and they're all into the old 70s, stuff, Sweet, Slade, Status Quo, all these British bands, Queen, and it was like, wow, this is really cool. So, I guess, maybe Greta Van Fleet. Some of these bands have the young audience that are still going, but not many of them. Not many young kids.
Well, I don't think Greta Van Fleet has a young audience at all. I think
No.
their audience is all 40 years.
Yep.
I think their audience is all older than they are.
Yeah.
Well, could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
No doubt. Well, let's go ahead. I mean, let's change gears here. I mean, we spent a good amount of time on that topic right there. I wanted to bring up something. I mean, as we can't, of course, not do an episode here, without talking about how shitty the modern day music press is.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone saw this thing about Taylor Hawkins. There was, I guess, in Rolling Stone, they did a big thing about it. They interviewed some musicians. Two of the guys, Matt Cameron, obviously from Soundgarden, Pearl Jam guy, who's been in every Seattle band, and then of course Chad Smith and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I guess I'm not going to get into the weeds of it, but the bottom line is it was a typical. I guess mentioned something about Taylor, and he was tired of touring, and he supposedly talked to Grohl about it, blah blah blah, whatever it is. That's not the important thing. The important thing is once again, it comes out and they're Matt Cameron, Chad Smith, both crying about, I would say crying, but they're complaining about how everything was taken out of context in the interview. And that they didn't say it that way, they didn't mean it, and they were sorry, and yada yada yada. Right? I mean, just a typical what we see when interviews, especially when they happen with this. This interview was done in Rolling Stone, so any of these obviously old school publications, I guess, trying to stay relevant, trying to still make some noise, get some attention. I mean, whether or not, the bottom line comes down to this, is whether or not, it was taken out of context or not. Why do interviews with these publications? And if you're going to do interviews with them, why are you not recording them yourself? I mean, just so you have some way to say, hey, this is not what it was. This is how it was said. This is how they took it out of context. I mean, they got to know these days with clickbait, with just social media, that any little thing you say that might, be considered controversial is going to get completely taken out, just blown out of the water, and just, I mean, it's just the way it is. But why do this? I mean, why not go, if you want to talk about something that's a sensitive topic like that, why go to Rolling Stone? Why don't you go to, I mean, we see it. There's a million musicians that have podcasts these days too, and some big name musicians. Obviously, just in metal, we know the ones that stand out, obviously, are Jimmy Justin, Rob Flynn, but there's a whole slew of this. Why don't you go? One of you, I'm sure, both of those guys have somebody they know. Oh, come on, Aftershocks. You know what I mean? Of course, why not? But you know what I'm saying? I mean, why go? Why go to a publication where you know what they're going to do?
Press, dude.
I know it's press, but
the publicist sets it up. Look, it is we all know about Rolling Stone. They're not a music magazine. They're a
exactly. They're not.
magazine.
They're social. Exactly.
But the point about it is they have established a name for themselves. They are, regardless if you like it or not, or their readership, they are the prestigious magazine to be in. And
are they?
And
are they
these
still?
guys, let's face it, all these guys, what's a surprises me is, these guys, the Chili Peppers, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, they're darlings of Rolling Stone. So you would think, and that just goes to show you, is the media doesn't give a shit. Is you could agree with them about everything. You could be their darling, agree with them politically, socially, everything else. If they have a chance to rip into you, that's cancel culture, man. They don't care. If they're going to get the clicks, or they're going to get the popularity, or they're going to sell issues by, I don't know if they were misquoted. I didn't actually read the interviews or not, or if it was just kind of, from a standpoint of me, when I directed the Inside Metal videos, and I could see, and I think it was probably the same with Matt, and then they probably might have knew the guys from Rolling Stone, so they feel comfortable. They talk, bullshit like friends, like Eddie Trunk and his friends, But I remember doing a lot of the interviews, and we were talking, particularly on the first one, the Pioneers of LA Hard Rock and Metal, because those early days of the Starwood and the Van Halen clubs and all that really intrigued me, because I was a little too young for that, but I knew all about it. So I would be talking with these musicians for hours. And a lot of times they came in, I got about 10 minutes, and then we'd be talking for hours. And I could tell they didn't. It kind of, you get in that space, and when you do these interviews, when you just are friends and you just start bullshitting,
let loose.
You're just let loose. You're just talking to regular people, and sometimes they say things that they wouldn't have said in a interview. Or they don't think about it. They don't think about. And before, you didn't have to think about it because you didn't have all these news sites gonna put it out as in a derogatory way. Look at the. So I think a lot of these people don't realize it. But what I say, when I do these interviews with people, and a lot of times they'll call me afterwards and say, "Hey, Bob, what did I say in there? Did I say this? Can you take this out?" I'm like, "No problem, man. I'll pull it out." I'm not one, and that's why I think I've got a good reputation. Why people know me in my interview. I'm not going to try to fuck someone over. And sometimes I'll even tell them on certain things, "Hey, on this one thing you said this. Do you want this in there?" I'll actually ask them that. And they go, "Yeah, that's fine." Or well, maybe you shouldn't. Cut that out. And there's times when the cameras aren't rolling. Oh, did you have the cameras off? Or the stuff that they said off camera.
Oh yeah,
unbelievable. I mean, especially about the Starwood days, stuff about David Lee Roth, and about some of the. I couldn't even say that on the podcast. It would be crazy shit. So a lot of times, but a lot of these other magazines and shit, they have the fucking tape player rolling through the whole thing. They don't give a fuck. If they're going to get something controversial or something that's going to get them hits, they don't care about the artist. They don't have feelings for these guys anymore. It's all about them. It's about me. Let me get. So I think, and that's always been with Rolling Stone. They don't give a fuck. They're a publication. They're not a music. They don't work for the artist. They'll do whatever's hip. They're not out there looking for new artists, promoting new bands. Whatever band is hip that's selling a million. They didn't put bands that, and I'm sure they despised, they obviously despised the LA bands, They didn't put Guns N' Roses and Metallica and those bands on until they're selling multi-million albums, That's when they put them on the cover. Otherwise, they wouldn't have. At that point, they almost had to, So, no.
Well, I mean, dude, just look at this article itself. The whole article is what? It's trying to stir up controversy about Taylor Hawkins dying. There's no other reason to write this article. If they're going to write something respectable, the respectable way to do it is, hey, this dude died. Here's the dates. Here's what these guys had to say about working with the guy. But that's not the angle they took. The angle they took was, here's these guys that heard rumors that he really was trying to get off the road and he died because they didn't accommodate him. That's basically what they did. It was set up to be a hit piece. That's
bullshit. Yeah. And they say, if you don't have a source, fuck you. Don't print it.
Exactly. But once again, but I understand. Like you said, back in the day. I mean, yeah, that's what you just did. I know what you mean. You just you went to the big publications. That's what you did. But I think, and like I said, maybe it's not even just a band. Maybe it's a management problem, that they're continuing to feed these. I mean, I guess I know it's just the whole business and everything's connected, whatever it is. But if I'm a musician that big, if you're a Matt Cameron or a Chad Smith, or just someone to that, that has that sort of, cachet, if you want to call it, or has that reputation of being a really, big time musician. I mean, these days, how dangerous, how it is out there. You know what I mean? The clickbait, they're looking for it. And yes, the Rolling Stones, all of them are looking for it. The only ones that aren't really, as you just said, Bob, are just, lesser known journalists or these podcasts and so forth, because they obviously want that interview so bad. They'll be like, hey, sure, whatever you want. Let me know what you want to take out and so forth. You know what I mean?
I don't know about that.
I think a lot of them do. But once again, that's why you align yourself with someone you kind of know that you can kind of trust.
I
They're
think
out there.
know the person
You
pretty
got to
well.
be smart, man. Like I was telling you guys yesterday, we emailing. Just looking at sports. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers. You knew that he knew the knives are coming for him because his stance on the whole vaccination thing. So he wasn't going to go to ESPN and do these interviews with these guys. He's going to talk about that particular topic. I mean, you could do an interview, obviously, with any publication talking about the band. But when it's a sensitive topic, something like Taylor Hawkins, you got to be careful who you talk to. I mean, like I said, Aaron Rodgers would just talk to the guy, Pat McAfee, because he's an ex-player. He knows him. He's friends with him. Yeah, they sit down, they have a beer, and then he gives it to him because he's not going to twist it and turn it. He's going to put it out just the way he wants it.
I don't know who the guy at Rolling Stone were, but obviously, like I said, both, Nirvana, Chili Peppers, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, they were all total darlings of Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
So they probably figured, hey, Rolling Stone, they're not going to do it. Maybe it was a different guy that I don't know who was the the author of that did the interview, but things have changed too since the 90s. Everything is clickbait these days, and even newer people are getting into the podcast game or into the interviewing game just to get the clickbait. So they'll do the same thing too. So you really don't know who you trust these days, and I think they probably figured, hey, Rolling Stone has done us great in the past. We'll do, and they probably opened up a little bit more than they may have should have. But the fact that they're printing stuff off rumors is bullshit, and I don't want to rehash this whole thing, but Chris and I, did a whole, a podcast episode about the whole David Ellison thing, and I was so pissed off that they're making these rumors that she's underage girl.
Yeah.
Why are you printing that? If she was underage, I think you made up the point. Why would he be going to the Scottsdale police? Knowing that he would be busted. Of course, she wasn't underage. Why even print that? Oh, there were rumors that he was grooming her. What the fuck does that mean? There are no rumors. If shut the fuck up. They're just. And here's a guy, David Ellison's, that's done nothing but good in the music industry.
Right.
And these guys are just trying to beat him down with rumors. Bullshit, which is proven bullshit. So, that's just one example, but that, and that's, I don't know who the media source that started that rumor, but once that went out, all the people were saying, oh, it's been rumored. No, it wasn't rumor. It was one stupid fucking news site that printed it. Probably the same news site that printed that Lee Kerslake died when he didn't die. So it's going, dude, Lee Kerslake died. Go, dude, I just talked to him yesterday. He didn't die. Then I talked to his manager, Adam Parsons, who manages you right. He goes, no, he didn't die. Who the fuck is printing this shit?
Yeah. Well, there's no standard anymore. There's zero standards.
Exactly.
I'm not saying all of them. It just takes one bad apple, and then a lot of them will, use that as a rumor. Rumor, don't print it. If it's a rumor, then no.
Look, while I agree with you, I know why people do it, because TMZ has proven that it's okay to be wrong.
That's what
TMZ has proven that you can make zillions of dollars, be wrong, and then just we were wrong.
We were wrong. Yeah, that's it.
I never thought the music industry would turn into TMZ. I always when it comes to Hollywood, that's one thing. When it comes to sports, ESPN, that's one thing. It's all about the money and the clickbaits. But I always thought there was integrity, especially in the metal community. Now, when it comes to hip hop or any of the pop music, I get that. That's going to be all TMZ bullshit. But usually when it comes to the metal crowd and the metal zines and the metal podcasts and all the metal news sites, I always said that there should be integrity with the metal. And there used to be. There used to be a lot of
when you were doing back in the day.
For the artists. Yeah, they wouldn't. And like I said, nowadays you could be a super fan of the artist. And if a news site sees something where they could get the clicks, they'll cancel you in a second or smash you in a second. They don't care. And the artists really need to realize that is no one is when they always say the press is your enemy, like in that Almost Famous movie, it is nowadays. The press could definitely be your enemy, but as much as it could be an enemy, and and I'll say, I'll give Blabbermouth. And the one thing about Blabbermouth, Bohr really will do his due diligence. He's not going to print bullshit. He's going to make sure stuff is real before he prints it. But to be in something like Blabbermouth is a big thing, to get a lot of hits and stuff. So it goes, it could be as much as it could hurt you if it's something you said or something that's, they're going to make a derogatory thing about it. It could help you in a big way too. So that's why people do it. They know that, and I think they all think that, okay, these guys are loyal to me. They've been good to me, in the past, but
Well, I just think it's, if you're a musician, you got to keep away from the like you said, Rolling Stone is not a musical publication anymore. It's a socio-political one, and the same thing just happened to Matt Pike, as we were talking about before we started this, from High on Fire and Sleep. Here's a guy, this guy, I don't know if you know much about Mike Pike. He's a good dude. I mean, he's a very good dude. You know what I mean? He's a very positive guy. Yes. I mean, everybody, he's once again, he goes on NPR of all fucking places.
Yeah.
Does this interview because he gets a lot of his lyrics from, just like, who just like anyone who's gotten lyrics from like some crazy, conspiratorial or some, scientific, science fiction based, authors in the past. He's I don't want to get into it. People can go look up and talk up, and read on it. I don't want to get into the weeds of the whole what happened. But basically, it was a total cancel culture hit. It was a total setup again. They knew what he wrote about, some songs that he was influenced by. That was what the interview was all about. He gave them the answers. They just all they're trying to do is just absolutely cancel this guy. And what for? You know what I mean? What for? Because they assume because he's writing about some of these things that he believes this. It's like along the lines like they talked about how Lemmy would collect all the Nazi memorabilia, right?
Sure.
Well, didn't mean he was a Nazi. Okay, he was just sort of. I mean, what do you call it? Jeff Hanneman did the same thing. He would write about Holocaust and stuff like that, right? Doesn't mean they're influencing that they look up to it. This is the same thing Matt Pike is doing with this one guy. I forget his name, but he's supposedly some conspiracy, guy from England that's been doing this, writing books for a long time, yada yada. Yada. But it had to do with because it was something that connected with someone, Jewish. So right away, that means you're Semitism, blah 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 blah. The typical, just attacks. But same thing. It's just like if I'm him, if I start hearing some of this stuff, I'm going to shut down the interview. I'd rather shut down the interview and let him write about how I questioned him and he shut it down than give them any answers because all you're doing is just feeding that fire. If you're going to continue to answer those questions, because there's setups, no matter what you say, and you could be so logical in your answers, it doesn't matter. That's not what they're looking for. They already have an agenda that they're going for. They want that narrative in that interview, and boom, they got it. And the good thing is, like I said, with the Matt Pike thing, I'm really glad to see it because, that stoner rock, scene is pretty sensitive to that kind of stuff. It seems like no one's buying it though. So I'm glad to see that of all things, but just shut down the interview. If you know it's a setup and you don't just right away, shut it down. It's better than going through
it. Could be as a negative too. Then the author will come out with some piece.
Well, let him.
Oh, yeah, he was a pussy. He didn't want to do the interview. He got, he got offended by something I said, and they'll spin it toward that way. So, I think a lot of guys like
they're going to spin it anyway. They're going to spin it anyway.
Yeah. But I think, maybe they think, well, I'll just go through with it. And maybe, like I said, once you get into talking, and I don't know how that interview went, if it was an audio thing or if it was, but maybe a lot of that was just spun in that negative way. But during the interview, it was just kind of asking about the lyrics, and then he just spun it a certain way. I don't know. I actually didn't.
It was a little bit more of a direct hit than the Matt Cameron thing. It was very deliberate. This guy was good. I mean, why would NPR want to interview Matt Pike anyway? I mean, yeah, you want a Grammy, I guess, but why want to interview this really stoner, really, super heavy band? It beats it boggles me. I'm sure it was just deliberately done. That's just my take on it. But anyway.
Well, dude, that's the press these days, and that's the problem. Yeah. That's what's killing the music business.
I think so too. I agree. Yeah.
And the problem is these press people, a lot of these guys were just nerdy kids or kids that wanted to be rock stars that couldn't make it, that are jealous. Seriously, that's what they are. And they just are looking to rip into it. And this is their way of getting publicity. A lot of these guys think they're more famous than the bands. And a lot of these guys seem to be more famous. They're getting more cred than some of the bands, some of these journalists and magazines and websites now with the podcasts and the video casts and YouTube. I mean, some of these YouTube people, it reminds me, I remember this, a buddy of mine that was doing, this all goes to, I think, what started with the whole influencer thing, the YouTube influencer.
Right. Yeah.
Years ago when my buddy got into publicity and he was working for this big publicity firm, and he was talking about, telling me, oh, it's such a pain in the ass. I go, oh, you're dealing with all these different magazines and TV stations. He goes, no, man, we're dealing with these YouTubers and these, what they call mommy bloggers. And he would work for products. And literally these mommy bloggers would demand stuff because they would have this, they would have like 1 million followers or 1 million views, and they would review something, but they would only review it if you gave them free shit. And they would actually tell you, if you don't give me this shit, if you don't give me this for free, I'm going to write a bad review about it. And I'm telling, my buddy, Fred, I go, dude, what the fuck? I tell him to fuck off. He goes, dude, you can't. I would tell the owners, and they just said, just give them whatever they want. Just give them whatever they want. We can't afford, and that's what the music industry is coming to, man.
Well, no, and you're right.
Please, these guys have the upper hand. These guys, these YouTube, all these social media people. I mean, look at this Kendall Jenner. She gets $1 million per tweet, supposedly, or $750,000 to $1 million per tweet on some things. These guys have more influence than any of the, musicians or head of the labels or so. People have to bow down to them. That's the sad part of the industry these days.
Yeah, you're right. No, in the past, if you did that, like if you when you do say when you were doing the Headbanger back in the day, if you wrote some,
fuck off, asshole.
Well, if you wrote some shitty hit piece, you go to the next show you'd go to. You got people want to beat your fucking ass. You know what I mean for doing that shit. That's the other thing too.
People I wrote some pretty. So but back then that was all. I mean, that was a whole different thing. But when we did the fanzines, I was reading through some of the articles or some of the internet. God damn, I had fucking balls back then. The way I was ripping into bands.
I know what happened. What happened, Bob? What happened to the balls?
No, but you just kind of, as a fan, when you're a fan and a band puts out a record that sells out or what, you're pissed. You're especially back then in the 80s. Oh, they're selling out they were my favorite underground band, and So I get that too. But now it's just you have to walk. Everyone has to walk on eggshells, man, and that's the sad thing because I always thought the metal industry was different, and it used to be, but now it's become, like you said, TMZ. It's no different.
Yeah. Well, it's the old guard. The old guard is still pretty hard. It's the new kids. It's the whole reason that there are no new bands because you can't be rebellious. You as many great bands as there are out there that are making noise, the Dirty Honeys of the world and what have you. None of them have that edge. None of them have those balls, and it's the same reason their fans don't have those balls. And
really say, like you talk about the stuff that bands used to say on stage. You can't. Comedians
I know.
You just can't. You'll get canceled. And it's like, even though you want to, or you could get away with only so much. And it just takes that one person to say, hey, I'm offended by this. I'm going to, and
one person,
your career's done. So,
especially
if you're an established band that has a career, you have a family to support, you have, or you're anyone with a career, you know that if you say something, you could get fired like that. So, unfortunately, in a way you have to play the game if you're going to be in this business. And that's why I'm out of this business. Later.
Awesome. Nice. Great. Well, I mean, we're over an hour right now. So, Bob, I just wanted to, bring up one other thing here for you. Something I know you've been involved in with the Nick Menza documentary. You were involved with. Talk a little bit about that. I know you did that. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I was down in LA, not this time, the last time, I met up with our good friend David Ellefson, and he's co-directing with Holly, putting together. It's going to go through his company, Ellefson Films, Nick Menza documentary, and it's looking fantastic. I've seen, and the real great thing about this is, I don't know if you're aware or the listeners are aware, but Nick used to document everything. He had one of those, in the 90s, those early, camcorders or the big, VHS.
Big on the shoulder cameras.
Big one, the big hunks.
Not big, but it was like the next level down.
Okay.
But he filmed everything, and there's some amazing footage of Dimebag and Vinny and Phil from Pantera because they tour together, and he filmed all this stuff. The band's goofing off and doing crazy shit, and again, this isn't going to be a PC kind of movie. It's going to be just raunchy party kind of. The footage is just great. It's just cool backstage footage. It just really shows. So that in itself, that Nick filmed, along with all the great interviews they've got together from former bandmates, the people like Chris Poland that was in a band with them just before, and of course David Ellefson, and people that played with his old band, Von Skeletor, and all different people that knew Nick from all angles. It's going to be a real good documentary. And like I said, even if you're not, a big fan of Megadeth and Nick Menza, just the bonus. All the footage is fantastic, and it's never before seen. It's never before released. It's all from his home videos. So,
and for people that don't know, Nick was a character, man. I mean, He was. I know. I interviewed him. The one time I interviewed him was after he was out of Megadeth, and he was releasing that. I forget what the album was called, but it was god awful. Whatever it was, that space thing.
Yeah.
And he was doing all kinds of weird art and stuff.
Max Norman produced it too, I think.
Yeah, but it wasn't good. But talking to him, man, he was all in on the aliens, and he was doing art of the aliens that he thought were coming back to save the planet and stuff. I mean, he was a character, man.
He definitely was.
Yeah, I remember, Bob, you remember the interview we did with Paris Mayo? He was talking about Nick Menzel when he tried out for that band White Devil that him and Harley Flanagan were doing. And they were going to get him in. And he was talking about that. They went to his house and he had this, I guess he had some business there. And it was just, he had these people working for him. And he was like, he was so like organized and just this, he just said he was like Chris was just saying, the guy was a total character. I mean, obviously I never, didn't know him. I know you obviously knew him.
I've been to his house before too. And he's got a lot of alien. He's way into that stuff. Oh, character. Funny guy too.
Yeah.
Practical joker, yeah.
Nice, yeah. Well, definitely looking forward to check that one out. And I think that's coming. There was something last weekend I think about that. Wasn't there some premiere for or something?
Like a little fundraiser. Yeah. Actually, he did a live stream.
Yeah.
And it was great. I was on the live stream checking it out, and it was really good. It was David and Holly, and then they brought in some people, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun. So, I think it'll do really well. It's got a lot of great feedback already from people that just saw the excerpt from the live stream. So it should be a fun one. I'm very honored to be a part of it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Bob, anything else you want to say before we wrap this up? This has been fun. It's always great to get to talk to
you guys. And I appreciate it. And glad to see you guys are going strong, of course, with Aftershocks you got going. And then, of course, with Chris and his Chris Aiken Presents and Classic Metal Show and everything else going on, man. I'm glad to see that at least there are some people out there keeping the metal scene alive in good fashion without all the bullshit.
Well, when are we going to get some Shockwaves return? Is there ever a thought of that?
I'm going to kind of get settled, after I move and get things together. I'm just like I said, right now it's like, my whole thing is, and I always talk to Matt, is when I'm not enjoying it anymore is when I stop. And it just was coming to that point where it wasn't something that not really, I mean, I always enjoy doing the interviews and talking to people, but if it becomes more work, then, because, as you know, it takes a lot and to promote and you got to get this and that and to set things up. So,
well, it's hard for you to get the guests, it's hard to get 2 guests at minimum.
That's true.
Especially a lot of the, the bands that you would do, a lot of them are overseas too, in UK and so forth. It's hard with the timing to get 2, 3 or 4 people to agree on a time. And it's really difficult, especially if you're doing that weekly or bi-weekly, it's really tough. So, but yeah, I think it would be great just to get an occasional Skull Sessions to pop up.
Well, I might pull a surprise on all of it, but it's going to be a mystery. You'll.
Ah, all right.
Nice.
The ever mysterious Bob Nalbandian. Okay.
Right on, guys.
All right. Awesome. Oh yeah. Once again, Bob, great talking to you. And we'll definitely do this again soon. Absolutely.
That's for having me on.
Fantastic. All right. See you, everyone.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cool. When it's time to rock, it's time to tune in to Crash Course Radio. Featuring the very best of the heavier music, from Slayer to Clutch to Fear Factory, it's all in one place, Crash Course Radio. To tune in to Crash Course Radio, simply visit www.cmsradio.net. You can also tune in on the CMS Network app by opening the app, clicking the musical notes at the top right corner, and selecting Crash Course Radio from our stations. All the best heavy music is there, so you should be too. Ditch the commercial radio and make Crash Course Radio your everyday station.